Hi everyone, this is the first part here of the animated character painting color scheme, how to select the correct colors that match up your photo reference. So we're going to go ahead, and first thing you need to do before you actually start is make sure that you mix your paints. So these are examples for analogous. I know it's pretty messy, but here we have one color, here we have our second color, and then here we have our third color for tertiary. I'm sorry, not tertiary, analogous color scheme. So this would be, you can use 2 palettes. You want to make sure you have a minimum of 12 colors, okay? And this is for the analogous color scheme. But if you have monochromatic, you obviously want to mix some additional tints. And if you have complementary, also you want to try to make a slate gray or a lighter brown. So task number 1 is going to be to mix your paints on your own according to your color scheme. The second thing that you're going to want to do is you're going to want to create a sample sheet, and I met with the majority of all the students on Tuesday, and so you should have a sheet, either analogous, monochromatic, or complementary. And if you need to see a sample, I have 3 samples on the whiteboard. So for analogous, again, you have your secondary color here, orange. You have your second hue, which is yellow, and for the third color you have yellow-orange. I also told everyone that you want to make sure that you examine your photograph first to see how many tints you're going to need, because you may need a really pale tint for skin tones, and so you're going to want that really pale tint that has a lot of white and a little bit of that hue. You also need to be careful with your grays. You want to make sure when you mix your tones that you're adding whatever gray you select to the hue to create your tone. So you can select either a 25% gray, 50% gray, or 75% gray. You could go lighter if you wanted to, but to really get that contrast, you want a darker gray. And you cannot use, do not use pure gray, white, or black, okay? The third thing you're going to want to do is create your shade. You can mix that to the very end because you'll be using that for your outlines, or dark shadows. If you want to gradate, you can mix those. So here what I did was I selected a 25% tone for my yellow and gray, and a 50% gray for my yellow tone here, and then for the third hue, my yellow-orange, I also selected a lighter gray and a 50% gray, and then combine that yellow-orange. Also remember that when you are only using the little solo cups, you are only using those little solo cups for tertiary colors. So that's what you're using that for, to store. And we're not filling it all the way to the top. You just want to mix just a small amount for, not a small amount, but enough to create your tints, your shade, and your tones for analogous. Okay? The next thing you want to do is look at your photo reference. So all of you have your black and white photo reference. Now you can use your electronic device to look at the color reference, or if you'd like, you can use a Chromebook and look at the color reference on your Chromebook. Is it absolutely necessary to have the color photo out? It's really up to you. I mean, you could really see here's a tint, and here's the palest tint here, and here's the palest tint, And then you can see that the darkest area is here, 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 and here with the black and white. If you're looking at the color photograph, that can determine, you can determine what colors you would like to use. So for example, this is green. Well, we don't have green, so we may want to use like a yellow orange. We could use the orange here for the face. So, but you want to make sure that the values in the photograph, whether it's the black and white or the color, will be matching the color values that you created with your color scheme painting. So here we go. This is now a complementary color scheme, and so we talked about on Tuesday how you're going to be mixing your mud, and then you're creating an extra color. So either you could create a greenish or a slight slate gray. So this is kind of like your extra color for your complementary color scheme. But going back to matching the values in the photograph with the colors that are in your color swatch here. So for example, what I did here is I labeled each individual color a different number. And so down below it's tint 1, tint 3, tint 4, tint 5, tint 6, tint 2, and here's my extra tint that I labeled 2. And you can use those numbers to reference when you start labeling your section, your grid drawing, okay? But you can see here, I'm going to want to use this pale tint. If her hair is going to be gray, I'm going to want to use that pale tint, that green, blue-green color. I'm obviously going to want to use tint number 5 for the skin tones here. And I could probably use a little bit of tint number 1 as well there. Okay? So that's what we're doing. So here we have one that's already labeled. And this one is for a, I think this is a monochromatic. Yes, I believe it's a monochromatic. But you could see, yeah, this is monochromatic because we have tone here. But you can see you don't have to label every little thing, like I didn't label this section here. But basically what you want to do is just label so you know what, you have a plan. This is your plan on how you're going to paint before you start painting. You have an idea of what colors you're going to be using. So here's shade 10, and here's shade 9, and then here's tone 5. And so you can see throughout, I label these shade 10, number 6, number 1, tint number 1, a pale tint number 1 here, a shade tint here, shade tint's going to be there. And so this should help you out with, this is kind of like the planning stage here. You're going to use 9 and 10. Here's a really important gradation that's going to go gradually shift from a shade here. And it looks like maybe these are going to be tones. I'm not sure. Maybe this area is going to be a tone, but it's going to gradate to the shade there. Okay? So, moving on. Here again is the analogous. And so if you need to test out the colors, there are small pieces of rectangular strip paper here on my desk. And then also little square swatches on my desk as well. And then if you are not using your paint, you want to make sure you cover it up. Here's an example of the analogous. This one's not as detailed as the monochromatic, but you can see here where I labeled yellow tone and shade. And then over here I labeled orange tone 2 and 3, a gradation. And over here I put orange shade, orange tone here. And then just by looking at this, we have an orange tint number 1. So our orange tint would be this one right here, right? And we could probably use, for a shadow, we could probably use tone, maybe for this area here. That could be our tone number 2. So you could see here how you're looking at this and you're trying to match it up. What would be a good color to use for this one? Well, you have to make the decision. Am I going to use the yellow or am I going to use the yellow orange? You get some really nice greens over here with the shade, so that's a decision that you have to make. So I think this is going to be a yellow shade. Okay? When you start painting, this is going to be really important for you to use the white eraser or the kneaded eraser to remove. You could see here you want to remove lift all the graphite, and you can see here this is the darker outline there. You still want to be able to see it, so you still want to be able to see, you know, what areas you're going to be painting, but you want to eliminate that heavy hard outline. And so this here you could see the areas that were rushed. So you could see this area was rushed here and this area, and so all that graphite is going to show up. So again, you want to keep it pretty light, but not so light where you can't see where you're painting. You know, if you erase all the lines, then how do you know what you're going to fill in or what you're going to outline? So going back to the analogous, again, once you start painting, you want to reference your photograph and then have your little color swatch completed, label your grid drawing, and you're ready to go. Then you can start painting. I don't know if before you start, you know, painting all the background areas, because the background is first, so this would all be painted here. All this would be painted all around here. Would be painted. I don't know if you want to practice again on that square swatch or the rectangular piece that's paper. That's completely up to you. Okay? But if you feel confident, go ahead and start painting. And the reason why I like for you guys to start in the background is because it's a larger area. All this here is really fine detail, and you want to paint that section after you paint the background. So the next one is a complementary color scheme. So you could see here we have some really nice tints, and we have kind of this blue-green that you can use. And you can decide, you know, her outfit is a green, so maybe use that for the suit. And like I said, you could use this tint here for the face, and then maybe add tint number 4 for the shadow. Okay? But you're kind of referencing this area here is a little bit more on the lighter side. So maybe using tint number 3 for that section. That's right here. And then mixing a little bit of the number 5 as well. Okay. So here's an example, a close-up. A little messy, yes, but you guys saw kind of the pace that I was painting this in. And so just as a reminder that you have your pure hues on either side, you have your mud in the center, and then you have a slightly darker of blue-green here, then you have a slightly darker of red-orange there. Once you mix your mud, if it's either you have too much or it's not brown enough, you can mix the extra, and that'll kind of be like the transition between the slightly darker and the mud. And then once you complete that, you can go ahead and add white to them to make them tints. And then make sure that you label everything, so then that way when you label your image, it'll be really easy for you to figure out what colors you're going to be using. You have a plan. So here's an example of the complementary color scheme with the labeled grid. So you could see all the pale tints that you have here. Here's a pale tint number 4. So you would take this pale tint and you would add some more white, and then to make it lighter. And you can see right in the center, I mixed on my palette in the center. It's up to you. But I have a little bit of that slightly darker blue-green here, because I'm going to be using that to outline and for fine detail. So here's my example, right? There's the color. And let's say this dries out. If it dries, then you just remix it and then just place a little bit next to it to make sure it matches up. Or you could place a little bit over on this side on the little swatch that you guys have. And that should help you out. So here's the final example here labeled. And you can look, and like I said, some things are not labeled, but gives you an idea. Like this whole back here is going to gradate from a tint number 6, and it's going to gradate to a pale tint number 2. So it's going to gradate from this tint number 6 to a pale tint there. You could have a third color if you like. You could see in his bow tie, because it's a lot darker, you're going to use the pure 6 there, and you'll use the number 4, which is either that green or grayish or lighter brown color that you've mixed. So, and if you have any questions, ask your table mates. And here's just another example of practicing. So you can practice blending. You've already erased. You've mixed your paint. You can use 2 cups if we have enough, just to help rinse out your brushes for the bristles. It's real important to keep them clean. Don't leave them in the water cup, because that's bad for the bristles. But this is going to be very important for you to have, because if you have this grid drawing that's labeled with all of the colors that you're going to be using, all of these here, it's going to be easy to paint. Okay, and I would recommend that you have this out, your grid drawing, that you have your color swatch out, that you have your little sample paper ready to go, that your station is clean, and you shouldn't have any Chromebooks out to do while you're painting. Okay, so here's an example of the monochromatic. I think we kind of went backwards, but that's okay. Monochromatic, not too many students selected monochromatic. So monochromatic, we do only have 10, so you want to make sure you mix an additional 2. And I believe we did put that on our swatch, so you have an extra 2. So that would be your 11. You decide. I wouldn't recommend that you create a shade. I would recommend that you create either another tone or a tint. So that's up to you, and you can get a really nice pale tint, and then you can get a darker gray if you want a darker gray here. And practice your blending. Have fun with that. And here's just a reference again, making sure you have your color swatch, making sure you have your black and white photo reference, your grid drawing when you're labeling. And again, referencing where the tints go, where the shades go, tones, making sure that all of these have been represented, including the 11th and the 12th extra color that you create. Okay? Here's another, just a close-up so you could see. I think this is another close-up as well. You can compare. So then you could say, okay, so this is where all my 10s are. This is where my tone 6 is. That's where I'm going to put there. And again, when you start painting, making sure that your station is nice and clear, that you have your paints out, your cup, your brushes that you need. Make sure you use the correct brush. You're not going to be using a flat for detail area, and you're not going to be using a number 1 for this background area. So you need to make sure that you use the right brush. So just as a review, number 1, what are you going to do? You are going to mix your paint. Number 2, you are going to paint this little sample. And we're not going to spend, an hour doing this task. Number 3, you're going to reference, photo, and select, and write the colors that you choose that match the values on your grid drawing. Oh, I'm running out of space. There we go. Okay, so have fun, everyone. I hope I come back Monday and you guys are so productive and have fun mixing, and make sure you stay on task. And if you have any questions, ask a peer, your elbow mate, a table mate, but please make sure that you are working and you complete all these 3 tasks. And then if you have time, which you will, number 4 will be to paint. Yay! You get to paint. And start with the background, and hopefully you guys are 50% complete. Okay? Thank you.